Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. This is Jed Brewer with the Below the Line Club and Study Groups. I'm very happy to have you on the call this week before Christmas. I hope that you are farther along in your holiday shopping, farther along than I am anyway, but I am progressing towards it. But very excited to have the conversation today, which is about being continuous learning organizations. And technology is increasing at a very rapid pace, and all of our companies are becoming more complex in terms of the technology that we're using. So it's really raised the specter for all of us in terms of how do we identify technology, how do we integrate technology, how do we utilize technology, and continually doing it, not just do it once and then stop and take several years off. It's becoming more of a process than an event for all of us. So the motivation today is to discuss this idea of becoming continuous learning organizations. I'm really pleased that we have three experts in the field who will be serving as our panelists as we explore this topic together. So what I'm going to do is introduce the three panelists, but wanted to just let you know before, we want this to be conversational. So if you have questions, I have you muted, but please type them into the GoToWebinar dialog box. I will be able to see those questions and I can relay them to our panelists at the appropriate time. So please type those questions in as they come for you. So let me introduce our first panelist here, which is Mark Lotstein. And Mark is president of ROG Consulting, lives up in the New England area. Mark, I don't know if you're a Patriots fan or not, but I hope not. But a bit about, you're not? Okay, good. I'm a Seahawks fan myself. But a bit about ROG Consulting. ROG Consulting helps clients increase profitability. It helps them better manage their business and implement new ideas and technology effectively and efficiently with minimal business disruption. And Mark also helps his clients with operational systems and controls, technology implementation, and maximizing the use of existing technology, such as scanning, back office software, and even as an HR side to his company where he helps people with state and federal labor law compliance, handbooks and policy manuals, outsourcing HR, etc. And Mark is, I've had the privilege of listening to him speak at a few study group meetings in the past, and kind of topics he's talked about there are how to get the most out of your back office system and how to streamline your systems and procedures. So Mark, excited to have you and welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here today.
And our second panelist is going to be Craig Drulard, and Craig is a co-founder at TeamWorks, and Craig lives down in the Carolina area, so the Southeast. And TeamWorks, a bit about their company, they've provided maintenance software for over 16 years. They have mobile, web-based, and legacy applications that assist their clients in reducing maintenance costs and improving efficiency. Their products that TeamWorks sells accomplish this by managing service vendors, reducing nuisance work orders, and automating the work order communications process. They also track asset warranties and tank inspections in an effort to save customers money and time. And Craig has spoken at industry events on helping firms choose mobile devices in the past. So Craig, welcome to you as well. We look forward to your input.
Thank you.
And lastly, our third panelist is John Monalepri, and John is a co-founder at RowLogic, and John is down in the New Orleans area. And love the background here on your picture, John. I don't know quite how you took it, if your boat was swaying or if you had a few too many hurricanes to drink, but the horizon doesn't look quite level, but good picture anyway. And, but a bit about John and RowLogic. So RowLogic is a 27-year-old company. They create software solutions focused on process automation, data integration, and business analytics. And multiple systems, I've noticed communicating with each other is often complex. And one of the things that RowLogic does is works to make sure that the data that's coming in from the multiple systems is not wasted, that processes are efficient as possible, and organizational communication is improved. And John has also had the privilege of speaking at some study group meetings in the past on delivery route optimization, optimal customer pricing, and tank and tote asset management and tracking. So John, welcome on the call too. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So let's go ahead and dive in. As our topic talked about, becoming continuous learning organizations. And so, Mark, maybe you can weigh in on what does it mean to be a continuous learning organization, and why is it important to be one?
Okay. And I think first I want to mention, obviously, the very fact that folks are members of the study group shows that they have an interest in learning and that they're trying to stay ahead of the curve, and I think that's great. I guess what I would suggest here is that continuous learning is not just for the management level. It's not just for CEOs and CFOs and CMOs. There's a number of people that are part of each of your organizations, and you need to be very careful that the folks in the bottom and the middle aren't stagnant. They need to continue to learn and stay ahead of the curve as well. Top level learning without mid-level and bottom level learning doesn't work out well in the end. And I think it's a combination of understanding where the industry is heading, understanding software and hardware developments, and making sure that you're up to date on how to best utilize the process and procedures within your organization.
That makes sense, yeah. And how have you seen other, I would say, best-in-class companies be continuous learning organizations?
Usually it's a combination of things. Membership and participation in NACS-sponsored events. Obviously, NACS has a lot of different learning opportunities, a lot of different information that's disseminated to them. Obviously, the study group has a lot of information also that can be disseminated either direct from you folks or information that's provided to a member that can then be shared with the rank and file, if you will. And basically, and just keeping folks, maybe it's bringing in a third party, maybe it's bringing in a specialist about dispatch or somebody who's a customer service trainer, something of that nature. So it's keeping people fresh, it's keeping people aware of new ideas and business practices, because let's be honest, I'm sure everybody can think of one or more people within their organization that's been with them 15, 20, 30 years and kind of gotten stuck in a rut. And that's usually, again, not a good thing.
So trying to broaden people's exposure outside of just their organization and maybe the lens that they've been seeing things through to date.
You know, if you still see somebody who's got, the pad and the paper with the old accounting line up on it, probably someone who needs to be looking at other ways to do things. Again, I think people can become stale. They can become complacent in how they do things. And again, that in the long run is not good for any organization.
Mm-hmm. And Craig, what, in your experience, what roadblocks often exist that prevent companies from becoming continuous learning organizations?
Typically, it's just heads down, moving forward, doing their jobs each and every day. They do things the way they've always done them because that's the way it's always worked. There is the fear of change. There is not knowing where to get new information, or really just being so headlong in their job they don't have the time or don't take the time to find out what changes are happening and what opportunities there are for them to learn about new opportunities, new technologies that might help them improve their operations and improve their process, improve their day-to-day way of doing things, data collection, and they just become complacent. Status quo has worked for 30 years. Let's continue that way. Why wouldn't we? It's been effective.
So time, we're doing our tasks, our head is down. We don't take that time to focus on the bigger picture. What role does management play, gentlemen, in helping guide firms or guide lower down employees to look outside their normal routines?
It's important. It's important for management to have buy-in on these technologies and becoming a continuous learning organization. it's one thing to say it, but to actually do it and to show that you're committed to learning and growing and leveraging the technologies that exist today. So it's very important for the managers to set that example.
Yeah, and then just encourage bottom-up discussions about these sort of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about technology and how it fits into be enabling us to become continuous learning organizations, I heard a talk recently, and they were just talking about how do we get to that next level. And I view technology as twofold. One, it can be used to make our firm more efficient. The things that we're already doing, it can help us do those things better. But two, it can also take us to that next level by enhancing either the customer experience or allowing us to do things new or innovative that we haven't yet done before. And the analogy the speaker was giving was of the high jump. And for many years, the scissor kick was the way to do the high jump. And people kept refining the scissor kick and trying to get better at doing the scissor kick. And incrementally, they could improve the height that they could jump. And then somebody came along and innovated and created the Fosbury flop, a whole new way of jumping. And that led to a step change in terms of the heights that could be reached. And, you know, technology is that two-folded or two-sided thing as well, where it can incrementally get us somewhere, allow us to do something better, but also lead to that step change. And so as we look out into the future, what technologies, and maybe John, I will start with you, might disrupt our industry in the years ahead?
Well, it's an interesting word choice of what technologies might disrupt our industry, because a lot of people do sometimes view the technology as a disruption because, again, as the topic of this talk is we've always done it this way, so now you're disrupting the way that I've normally done it with this new way of doing it and this new technology. But it really needs to be, seen in a positive light that all these new technologies are going to help us do our job better. So, one technology for sure is just the whole IoT, the Internet of Things, that is taking hold of almost everything, or at least that's the direction we're heading in. Having everything has the capability of being interconnected. This is going to and has already make a lot of things possible that weren't possible in the past because you didn't have access to the data that you needed to, or the information, et cetera. So, with the Internet of Things, we can, have systems talking to each other that weren't talking in the past, and even, hardware talking to each other and through other systems and software, making, data and real-time analytics available, mobile technologies, things that are getting better, stronger, faster, cheaper, more affordable, that you can implement, all of which is going to help with improving communications throughout your organization.
So the Internet of Things, in your mind, being one technology that can either disrupt, or I like the way you spin it, maybe positively enhance our organizations. Craig, what's your view on technologies that may be coming down the line that we should be aware of?
Well, artificial intelligence, and we're not talking about Skynet and iRobot and those sort of things, but artificial intelligence is a growing enterprise that's happening out there. That's at this point for the vast majority of us is out of reach financially, but there are pieces and parts that are starting to come into focus that that'll be very beneficial. I met with a company just, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and they have something as affordable as a sump pump that is reading the energy consumption and reading points from that, and it's self-diagnosing itself. It knows by the way it's drawing energy when pieces and parts are starting to go bad. It knows when it's pumping and there's nothing to pump. They're really starting to take this data and currently, if you have a piece of equipment that's going bad, you have to send someone out there to find out what's going on, or you have to wait till it breaks to find out. Well, this AI in our world is going to be able to tell us how equipment is performing, and it's basically going to be able to do some predictive maintenance and tell us when things need to be broke or need to be fixed before they're breaking. So it starts to consume more energy, or starts to do this, starts to do that. So all the data that John was discussing is going to be able to relate to each other and give us good feedback about how we need to react to that data.
So instead of us having to go and search out the data, it's going to be pushing us, but useful information, not
right, by learning, exactly, by learning from itself.
Mm-hmm. Mark, what are your thoughts on technologies coming along that we should be aware of?
I think Craig and John covered a lot of it there. One that I think we're seeing a lot of today, whether it's in CSP or CSN, and we're seeing more and more is self-checkout. And I think that's something, at least on the retail side of the industry, is a real change to how things are done, to labor costs, to shrink potentially in other areas. So I think self-checkout is going to be a big change, and one that we need to keep a close eye on. We're seeing more with mobile payment, and less and less with cash. So what's driving things out at the pumps? What processes again can be done without any type of human intervention?
Mm-hmm. And the big question that I have isn't so much what is the technology going to be, but it's more organizationally, how do we position our firms to leverage these technologies? And Craig, I welcome your thoughts on what we need to do culturally to position our firms to leverage these technologies.
Well, and you're right, it is all about culture. If you've ever heard of QLC culture, question, learn, change, you question your day-to-day business. Is what we are doing efficient? Is it working? Taking the time to learn, go out to some of these places Mark was talking about, and find out what's out there, what the systems are doing. They have these the groups where you're getting amongst your peers, kind of like they're doing today, and there's maybe finding out what others are doing, finding out what's out there. So learn. So question what you're doing, learn what others are doing or what else is out there, and then after you analyze that, if necessary, or if beneficial, change. Don't be afraid of making a change. It's so easy to do nothing. It's easy just to make a safe bet and hang out where you're at. But if you question, if you learn, and if you kind of look over that change before it happens, before you pull the trigger and jump into it, you should certainly better yourself by making these changes. And just observe the trends that stick. There's a lot of things that come and go, and you don't want to be on the bleeding edge, because that bleeding edge can sometimes let you bleed too much. But you also don't want to get left behind. So somewhere between the latest, greatest, and 10 years in the past is where you need to be. You need to kind of see what's out there, see what's hanging on, and then start to look to see how that can help enhance your business.
Mm-hmm. And so, Craig, I heard you say a little bit there. Don't be on the bleeding edge, but you got to be pushing your organization along at the same time. And Mark, I'm curious, in your experience, where do you see what I would say, quote unquote, experimentation with new or emerging technologies? Where does experimentation fit in with continuous learning organizations?
I agree with Craig. I'm not a huge fan of being on the bleeding edge. I think it's a very apropos name. If you're an incredibly risk-oriented person, God bless. I tend to be a little bit less risk adverse. And I would just like to say one thing to the prior question, if I may, Jed. I think people need to utilize, I think that having a position, a chief technology officer or something similar, is really important. And I'm also going to throw out there that we're in an industry that I think, unlike many others, has a significant number of multi-generational businesses. So if somebody has sons and daughters that, they might still be in high school. They might even be a little bit younger. My kids are 9 and 11. And some of the stuff that they teach me when it comes to apps and the internet is pretty entertaining. they're the up and coming generation. So if you've got teenagers or 20-something family members, listen to them, get their opinion, get their insights and what they're seeing and what their generation is looking for, and have somebody who's again a chief technology officer or something similar, so that you're getting fresh ideas. You have somebody who's out there looking for this stuff and can bring it to you and understands the petroleum business and technology. So I think that's key. But again, for that bleeding edge, again, versus leading edge, you want to stay aware of it, but it's kind of like buying a brand new car the first year the car model comes out. You read up on it, you look into it, but more often than not, you let somebody else work the big kinks out of it, and you can get the second year that model comes on the market. That's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm. And John, what about you when it comes to experimentation? Do you see things similarly?
Yes, there's definitely, a difference between, as Mark was saying, the being on the bleeding edge versus the leading edge. And a lot of these new technologies, they do, much as we can with the beta testing and whatnot to get all the kinks worked out. When you put that system in place in the real world, then, you bound to come across some bumps in the road. And so if you can smooth those bumps out or have other companies smooth those bumps out before you get on that same path, then make sure your ride a lot smoother.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, you mentioned chief technology officer, or having somebody on the team who's kind of focused on technology, maybe what's coming in the future. Are you seeing that to be a more frequent role in companies that they're putting someone in that place?
Without a doubt. There are just so many new things that are being introduced into the marketplace, whether it's, the continuation of PCI compliance, whether it's mobile pay, again, self-checkout. There's any number of new technologies, and it requires a person dedicated to looking at these different opportunities, these different technologies that are out there, and who, again, it's a combination position. You can't just understand technology. Obviously, the petroleum sector is a very intricate one. We have a lot of limitations with different pieces of equipment that we have to utilize. So it's a combination of understanding what we can do within our industry and what new technology and opportunities out there blend or mix well with it. And it is very much a standalone position.
Mm-hmm. And guys, I'd be curious your input on size of company where it starts to make sense. Is it any size company? It doesn't matter if you're big or small. You need somebody who's playing this role, whether it's full-time or part-time. John or Craig, welcome your thoughts.
Yes, I think, any size company, it would be good to have someone, as Mark mentioned, that if you have family members, whatever, that are in that upper teen, lower 20s in this new technology, just to get a pulse on this technology industry, because it changes so rapidly and there's so many options out there and things that you can do. If you don't have somebody focused on that, evaluating and looking at your own internal, doing a process evaluation of your own internal manual processes, to be able to see how you can automate them. If no one's focused on that and everybody's just nose to the grindstone and doing their day-to-day jobs, then you're never going to progress.
So one of the things I see as we talk about technology is, one is identifying the technology that's out there, two is then integrating it, and then three is utilizing it. And maybe we can discuss each one in turn and start with the identification side. And Mark, I know this is an area where you spend a lot of your time helping companies, but often I see companies, they have a need, they need a solution, some solution is out there, but it can be hard to source the solution and figure out what is the best solution. There may be multiple options out there to help you. what are your recommendations for how we go about identifying the best solution for our firm?
I'm going to give you both a positive and in some way, I don't know if I want to say a negative or a cautionary thought. I love that so many members of the study group talk amongst themselves. And I think in general, a lot of you understand similarities and differences between your organizations. But sometimes folks hear that a particular software or hardware is either phenomenal or is less than stellar, and make decisions based on someone else's feedback. Well, without knowing all the details, was it the right software or hardware for that particular company? Was it implemented properly? Was the staff trained how to use it correctly? Was it utilized correctly? I've seen some people start down the wrong path. Again, it was never intentional. It was just a lack of understanding or knowing that it really was an apples-to-apples comparison, if you will. So from my perspective, I think you need to really focus on your organization. What is it that is a pain point? What is it that is an area you want to improve on? And honestly, it's all about detail. Getting detailed understanding of what it is you want to do differently, where it is you need to progress, and then conveying that effectively to a software or hardware provider. And an example might be, does your software handle cigarette rebates? And the software vendor says, yes, it does. Okay, what does that really mean? Is it 2 clicks or 22 clicks? Is it for all stores, or does each store need to be done individually? So, something as simple as, does your software or hardware do this, and getting a yes or no answer is not what you want. You really need to get into the details and dig deep to make sure you're achieving the goals that you want.
That makes sense. And John, maybe a question for you. In today's world, our businesses are so complex, and there's many different systems that our organizations have, and they all try to talk to each other. And a question I hear at meetings quite often is there a one-size-fits-all solution, something I can get out there that is going to streamline and one-size-fits-all? And so I open that question to you and say, does that exist? Can I expect it to exist?
Well, there are some systems, some back office systems that do a heck of a lot of things and try to do everything for you. But, typically there's not one single system that can be all things to all people and do it really well in all areas. I know PDI recently is acquiring a lot of companies and trying possibly to be all things to all people, but we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out. But, you could have a package, a system that has a great accounting package, inventory module, et cetera, but might not be so great at, dispatching or other things. I guess it's kind of rare that, if you have one software that is, best in class at every single component of your business that you're trying to run. And it seems like even though we're all in the same petroleum marketing industry, it seems like every company we run into does things just a little differently than the other one to throw a little monkey wrench in things. So, so supplementing, your main system with some best-in-class third-party apps, is certainly a good thing to do, and as long as those systems can integrate and communicate with your existing systems.
Mm-hmm. So, Craig, do you feel similarly that one would need some third-party applications to fit on with the main underlying system?
Not in every case, but I would say in most cases, yes. I mean, in our experience, when you try too hard to be all things to all people, you water down a lot of each individual component. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a system out there that's going to work for certain customers, but if you have a focus on a specific component, then you need to make sure that it's capable of doing that. If not, at the very least, when you go into an enterprise class system, you need to ensure that that system is open enough that you can shop around for your best in class system and put it in place on top of it or alongside of it.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, what would be the important questions we should be asking ourselves when we choose a technology?
I think it needs to be very, needs-based. What are my goals? What am I trying to achieve? I think, again, you need to go not just to management, but you need to speak to the folks in dispatch, to the folks at the store level, at the bulk plant, and understand what they're seeing, whatever interaction they have with the software, whatever data they need access to. And the questions really become, what is the upfront and ongoing cost going to be of this? How much time and effort are going to be involved in implementing it and maintaining it on an ongoing basis? What's the ROI I'm going to get out of it? And, pretty standard questions. And I think to the prior question, people have to understand the one-size-fits-all is not just the functionality of a software or a hardware, but is it something that they can utilize? There are some softwares and hardwares out there that require a much higher level of technology understanding, computer comfort than others. So if you don't have the staff that have the right training and knowledge base, you could buy a software or hardware that causes more problems than not. So I think it's very important to understand, again, what's it going to cost up front on an ongoing basis? What is the value it's going to bring to the table? And how easily can I utilize it?
Let's talk about ROI for a second. I'm glad you bring that up, Mark. I mean, technology can often be tricky when we're thinking of implementing something. Often there's an explicit upfront cost, maybe an explicit ongoing cost, but it can be hard to measure the benefits that we're going to receive over the long term. So Craig, do you have any insights for us on how we evaluate the upfront cost versus the potential long-run benefits to understand if it's worth it?
Well, anytime you start a new project, you should try to find, through your study group or through references by the company that you're working with, or folks like Mark and others that are out there that might be able to help you. You should find something similar, some case studies that you can reference. Okay, what are your ROIs? For a lot of processes, regardless of the technology, take the technology out of it. If you're starting something new, a PM system, for example, you can find studies out there that, regardless of the technology, can tell you the benefits of it. It's widely known that PM saves 20% of your operational budget. Predictive maintenance adds another 12% on savings. So that kind of information is out there if you can dig for it. So if it's a new process, take the technology out of it. Just look at the process itself and see what kind of return on investment you get from there, and then pick the technology that's going to fit your specific knowledge of technology. How comfortable are you with it? You can get something that's very complicated and very granular, or maybe you don't need something like that. Maybe you need something that's a little more modular and easier to use, but it's kind of quick and in and out kind of thing. So take the technology out of it, look at the process you're trying to implement or the goal you're trying to implement, and look at the results and the return on investment of that specific process or task rather than the technology you're choosing to use for it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, often when we talk to our vendors about something, obviously they have rose-colored glasses on what the return is going to be. Mark, I know you deal with a lot of software companies and hardware companies alike. Should we trust those ROI? Should we be skeptical of them? Give me some insight there in your experience.
Well, I mean, I think it very much depends on the vendor. If the salesperson or the support staff has really done their homework and understands your business and can specifically give you examples to your structure, then that could be very reasonable. Anyone who's going to throw out generic numbers, implementing this will save you 10% or cut costs by 8%, I have a problem with that. I think each of the organizations has different needs, is different processes and procedures, and I don't think you can make a blanket statement like that. But again, if they do their due diligence and can give specific, detailed example to you, then that could be very valid. Again, I think it was Craig who said it, I would certainly be reaching out to other users of the software or hardware, folks within the study group and so forth that utilize it, and get some real feedback from current users.
Last question on the technology identification side, as I see members try to implement things. And the question is, should the technology dictate our processes, or should our processes dictate the technology that we ultimately choose? Craig, I'll open that up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the process should definitely push the technology. I think that it should cause you to review your processes. But again, if you take the technology out of it, if you're passing a piece of paper around and you're distributing it to 5 different people, there's the reason you have that process in place. And I think you need to understand the reasons for that. You know, if you can pull the technology, their equipment, or whatever this piece of technology is out of it and think of it in its most basic nature, that should drive your technology decision making. Why do you do that process? Though should be a result of that question. Is if you're passing this rock around, why are these people getting the rock? Well, because they've always got the rock. What do they do with it? Well, they throw it in the trash can. Well, let's get that person out of the rock passing process. But the process should drive your decision, but making that decision should cause you to review your process.
John and Mark, interested in your thoughts. Should the technology dictate our processes, or should our processes dictate the technology?
Process dictates technology, in my opinion. The fact is, I think too often we allow a vendor to force us to do a particular process or procedure because it fits their specific technology. So when your hardware or software vendor comes in and tells you this is how you have to do it, you need to question, are they telling me this because that's the only way their product works, or is it truly in my best interest? Again, over the years, what I've found is that vendors tend to themselves get into a rut and look to push the process that is easiest for them to implement and/or makes their software or hardware function best, not necessarily in the client's best interest.
Thank you. So,
yeah,
John, do you have something to add? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, I agree, that the process dictates technology. However, you have to understand that because of the technology, there may be a better way to do the process, and most likely there is going to be somewhat of a different way, because now you're replacing a manual process with a technological process. And so sometimes that, there is a better way because this new technology is available.
I think that's an important point, John. It feels sometimes we implement a new technology and our people do the best at de-automating the best automation that we put in.
Exactly, yes.
And yeah, just to clarify, Jen, I'm not saying that you should continue to do things the way you've always been doing them, but what I'm saying is that just because a hardware or software company says, do it this way, take it with a grain of salt, look at it. Maybe it is a good way to do it, but again, is it self-serving or is it in your best interest?
Yeah, and right. To your point, Mark, we're talking about being continuous learning organizations in our companies. Your vendors, I imagine, could be in the same rut of doing things the way they've always done things and suggesting recommendations and solutions as they've always done in the past. Would you agree with that?
Without a doubt. I mean, we see it every day. They and again, it's human nature. It's the easiest path. This is how I know it works. This is how I've done it the last 10 times. Why should I do it any differently? And again, I think in many cases, salespeople and even implementation people at software and hardware companies, they're already starting to think about the next sale or the next client implementation, and therefore they're going to stick to a path that's tried and true and easy for them. They might not be thinking about what you do differently, or a different need you have, or how to themselves get out of that rut and better utilize their own software or hardware. So I think it's a combination. You should certainly listen to them and ask questions, but don't blindly accept.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move to the integration side. And we've talked a little bit about identification and the needs there. But once we have a technology in place and we've got to stick it into our organization, the biggest complaint I see among our members or challenges is just the resistance to change that our team members have. And it's that attitude that we put in the title of this. But we've always done it this way, and we've talked a little bit about it before. But John, I welcome your thoughts on what we can do culturally as a management team, in addition to what we've talked about before, to get our people open to change as opposed to resistant to change, and perhaps in a way without feeling threatened by the new technology, which can often be the case.
Yes, yeah, that's what I find. A lot of people feel threatened by the technology. They feel like it's going to replace them. And so it's important for the managers to convey to the employees that, this is not going to replace what they do, but it's going to make them a better, perform better and do their job better. It should obviously make their current process a lot easier, but it's going to open the door for them, hate to use the cliche of, working smarter, not harder, but it's very true. If these new technologies, and we talked about the data that's so readily available with it, and, real-time analytics, I mean, it can make everybody like a little mini manager, so to speak, such that they don't have to go to their manager and ask, well, what should I do about this? They can actually, through the apps they have and the reports and analytics that are available, or should be available, that they can make smarter decisions about how to do their job and to improve, whatever department they're in charge of or working in. And so that time, the technology should save time. So these instead of being threatened by it, it'll give them more time to be able to think and evaluate. And I was reading an article about the Internet of Things, the IoT, and they were saying that the T should also stand for thinking. That we can't just blindly do these things, but we need to utilize that technology and take the time to think and how to improve your processes that you're using.
Yeah. Other thoughts that maybe Craig or Mark you may have on culturally when we integrate a new system?
Well,
again, I think people just. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, that's right, John. Or Mark, go ahead.
I just think people need to keep an open mind. You know what? There's like so many things in today's world. Listen to what somebody else has to say. Think about it rationally and see if it makes sense. Too often we're culturally closed off and we think we know what's best. And I don't think it's not a good mindset to have across the board. So I think people just need to be willing to listen and understand. And listen, not everything's a good idea. Many things aren't the right fit for somebody, but if you can find that 1 or 2 out of 5 or 10 things that are a good fit, that's what you need to do.
Thanks. Tips and tricks when we actually do an integration of what works well and other best practices. So just an example of a big project like a back office system that I see so many of our members implement and struggle with. My rule of thumb on the back office is it's going to cost twice the budget and take twice as long in order to get the thing ultimately implemented. So trying to avoid that and actually meet deadlines and projected costs. What are best practices to make it successful? One thing I have seen is identifying a champion to lead the integration tends to be quite important to the success of it. Craig, would you agree with that?
That is vital, in my opinion, to a successful integration. At our company, we have a champion here for the customer, and we would like the client to have a champion to communicate with us. It kind of avoids that finger pointing and he said he was going to, she said she was going to. It's like at an emergency situation, you don't just say, hey, somebody call 911. You point a finger and say, hey, you go call 911. Someone has to ultimately be responsible. And that champion is a person that should be able to understand the end game here. They should be a stakeholder in implementing this. They should also either have the authority to implement some change or have regular debriefing and updates with a person that's in that authority to make that change. The ones that are going to be collecting the data and putting the data in and are going to be interacting with it, they are resistant to that change. They want to do things the way they've always done it because they understand it, they're comfortable with it, they know how to do it. So that champion needs to help smooth that transition, and needs to make sure they have the tools they need to do their job, make sure they know what they need to do and the reason why they're doing it. And if that champion can be there to help both the vendor and the users, then it'll make the implementation go much smoother and much faster.
And sometimes I see appointing the champion as keeping somebody in their current role and then putting this on top of them, so it's a additional responsibility that they have. And that often is challenging for that individual because they get overworked or stressed, or they continue to focus on their day-to-day and not focus on the project, or vice versa. What would you say, Mark, or in terms of best practices to being successful when integrating technology?
I think two things. One, yes, having that champion, but the champion maybe isn't somebody who's intimately involved in each and every aspect of the project. They're more of the 10,000 foot, keeping a positive attitude, smoothing any ruffled feathers maybe internally. From our perspective, and I was speaking with a client about this earlier today, there's going to be a champion or contact point in wholesale. There's going to be a champion or contact point on retail, in accounting. So, there's not going to be one person who's going to be intimately involved in every aspect of a project like this. So that champion, again, it almost might be more of a chief rah-rah person than somebody who's intimately involved in the detail level stuff. And the other thing I'm going to say that's real important with integration, and again, it's a common theme or thread through all of this, the old saying, the devil is in the details. Making sure that you're conveying to the necessary parties exactly what your expectations are. Too often folks use generic language or get yes/no answers. And again, I think people need to be very specific on what their goals are and what their expectations are, and get sign-off from all involved parties.
That makes sense. And you talked about the chief technology officer earlier, and that person could potentially be a champion depending on the project here. But a question, how is that chief technology officer the same as or different from IT directors that we may already have on our staff?
I think the IT director is your day-to-day, in my opinion. That's somebody who's making sure all the PCs are working, who's making sure the VPN is up and running, who's dealing with, things of that nature. I think this chief technology officer is much more of a vision person. They're looking at the future. They're looking at what we need to do next, and they probably oversee that IT person and can help with certain things. But I don't picture them as the in the trenches, PCs and VPNs and the phone network type role.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thanks. So we got about 10 minutes here to wrap up. I want to move out of the integration side and into the utilization side. So we've integrated, we've chosen, and now we have this system, and it may even be a system that we have today. Often a concern I hear from members is we got this great system, but we're hardly scratching the surface with its potential. So the question, I guess, John, I'll start with you. How do we utilize the software, the hardware, the data, whatever it is that we have to the best of its ability organizationally?
Well, hopefully there was some really good training, because what we find is, if something's not working right in some software, or these reports aren't giving me what I thought they would, and then you trace it down, and it's because somewhere along the way somebody's not putting this particular piece of information in, or going through the process correctly, like we talked about earlier, where as far as the process defining technology or technology defining process, where sometimes they're so used to doing it a certain way that they get to that part and they bypass the technology somehow. So it's very important for the managers to be involved, to utilize the analytics that are typically built in these softwares, where it's a continuous evaluation and continuous learning, as we're talking about, but just to make sure that everything is being done as it was designed to be done, and everybody understands his piece of the puzzle, and what that end puzzle is. Because if they don't understand, well, why is it important for me to do that this way, because it impacts this next department or this next metric or whatever analytics that may come from it, they need to understand why, not just what they do, and that's one of the ways to make sure you're utilizing the software to its best of its ability.
Greg, any thoughts that you have from your experience?
Well, John's right in that you need to kind of make sure that you have plenty of training going into it. You understand, both you and the vendor understand what your goals are, but then you got to get your team to embrace that technology, and you need to do that by ensuring that all stakeholders, and that includes the people that may not be getting the reports, but they're putting in the data. They need to understand why their part is important, what they are doing, where they fit in the cog, what cog they are in this machine. But you also have to make sure in the beginning that you are enforcing the change. If you have a weak leadership that's going to be implementing this, then you're going to have some folks that are resistant to change, that aren't going to change along with it, and they can hamstring the project and really bring the utilization of to no effect. If you are getting 85% good data and 15% bad data into your new system, into your new technology, then those reports aren't any good. So make sure that each individual understands what they're putting in, why they're putting it in, and how they fit into the system, so that they know what good data is, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And I think that'll help get good data in, therefore increase the utilization of the system as a whole throughout the enterprise.
Yeah, so some good points there. Getting the buy-in from the individuals, to recognizing that all people may not make the change. They may not feel the change with us, and getting the right people on the bus. And then 3, I heard you say, not being wishy-washy as a management or leadership team.
Can I interject one quick thought there, Greg?
Yeah.
That is, a lot of times people don't realize that potentially the software or hardware was implemented incorrectly or not 100% correctly. So a lot of times there's a belief that the software isn't working right or the data is bad. Well, we need to look at not just the training and how it's being utilized, but was it configured properly to begin with?
And some of that gets pushed back on the vendor. If you come on and you do 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, 2 years of training, whatever it is, and then you let the customer go off on their own, and there's no contact, and suddenly they're 1 degree off. Well, 1 or 2 degrees off in a couple of years is way off course. So there needs to be that ongoing discussion as you're implementing. And it takes 6 weeks for it to become a habit. So during that 6 weeks, you need to really pay attention to all the nuts and bolts and moving parts and make sure they're being turned the way they need to be turned and being pushed the way they need to be pushed. And after that 6 weeks, it's havoc. It's just the way business is done with that from that point forward.
So Mark, should there be a regular review process or audit of how we're utilizing systems, how the systems got integrated and implemented, and what would that look like if we should have one?
I think that goes without saying. Everything we've talked about today is that nothing is stagnant, nothing is the same, and if anything, the pace is increasing. So what upgrades have been offered to your software? What new versions of hardware are out there? Have you had staff turnover? Has there been changes in your business? Did you add a new business unit? Did you expand an area? Did you sell off a part of the business? Going out to the various groups within the organization and understanding, are there any issues? Has any new problems cropped up? And when it comes to software, there's updates. Maybe there's a bug. Maybe something that did work is now broken. Maybe there's something that's been released that you don't know about that would be a significant enhancement to how you're doing things. I mean, I think this is certainly at least a once a year review process, not to switch software or hardware, but to make sure you're utilizing what you have effectively.
Once a year, yeah, that's good input and advice. Well, guys, we're wrapping up our hour here. I just want to leave time for each of you to make any closing comments that maybe we haven't been able to touch on here to date. So, John, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I guess I would just, emphasize that, technology is not only about automating a process, but it's also about being able to analyze your business, as a result of the processes that have been automated, based on the data collected, so you can make better business decisions for your company. And so, just don't be afraid of these new technologies. They can help you tremendously, and just embrace them and have fun.
John, do you have specific areas you think we should have automated as a business? Petroleum marketer, convenience retailer?
I mean, any part of your business where somebody is and there are still out there, because I come across them often, where there's a lot of paper processes that are still being done. People, writing filling out paper forms and passing them on to the next department that's then typing those in. I mean, anytime you're doing anything on paper, and it's going to be handled multiple times. I mean, that in this day and age, that's data that needs to be electronically stored somewhere.
Makes sense. Yeah, get rid of paper wherever possible. And what about closing comments for you, Craig?
Well, when you're implementing a new technology, whether it's hardware, software, integration between existing systems, whatever it is, when things go good, things go good. But when things go bad, that's when you really need to understand who you're working with. When you're interviewing a new vendor, and when you're going out to their resources or their references, make sure they're not just giving you the creme de la creme. They need to be giving you. You should hear some adversity. Reach out for that. Ask for that. You really need to understand how the technology, how the software company, how the integrator, whoever they are, how they work under adversity. Because when it gets tough, that's when you really need the vendor to step up and put forth the extra effort, extra time, and the extra resources to push to the finish. It's easy to get to, all we have left is finishing. So you need someone that's able to push to that finish line when things, Mark said, devil's in the details. Once the details hit, someone's got to be able to react to something unexpected, because it always seems to raise its ugly head there toward the end.
Thank you, Craig. And Mark, last comments for you.
Sure. I think that number one, you need to be focused. Don't bite off too many projects. There's a lot of different things that are out there in the marketplace. Pick 1, 2 at most that you think are going to give you the greatest return on your investment. Make sure that you are very detail oriented, because again, misunderstanding in verbiage or expectation will cause significant problems in the long run. And lastly, have a written set of goals and a validation process so that when all is said and done, you can look back at this project and be able to grade it on whether or not it was successful and to what degree. Too often people take on a project and at the end they're just happy they're done with it. They really can't quantify the value.
Mark,
and
Craig,
have a wonderful holiday season. Happy and healthy to everybody.
No, thank you, Mark, and John and Craig. Thank you for being on the call and helping us all become continuous learning organizations. Appreciate all your insight and the lively interaction. And members, I'll send out Mark, Craig, and John's contact information. So if you want to reach out to them with any follow-up questions, I know they'd be happy to talk with you and answer anything you may have. But appreciate your time here on the call. Hope you found this to be a good use of your time. And as Mark said, we wish you all a Merry Christmas and a great holiday season as well. Goodbye.